Welcome to the Organic Wine Podcast. Hello from Los Angeles. This is Adam Huss. Thanks for listening and Happy New Year. My guest for this episode is Nathan Stuart, and he's got one of the rarest and coolest jobs in wine. He is the in-house shepherd for Tablas Creek Winery. I don't know if you know Tablas Creek, but suffice it to say that if you had to pick the greatest wineries in the United States, by almost any measure, Tablas Creek would be in the top 5 on that list. They introduced many of the Rhone varieties of grapes to the United States and were among the first to popularize them. They're the only winery to have imported and cultivated all of the grape varieties of Châteauneuf-du-Pape. And in addition to that, Tablas Creek has been biodynamic for years and recently became the first winery in the world to become Regenerative Organic Certified. They're like an incubator winery for holistic ideas about how farming can be improved to create healthier vines that are more integrated into the natural landscape so that wine is as good as it possibly can be. Nathan's role as the shepherd is integral to this vision. More than that, he helps explain why animals are essential to not only regenerating vineyard soil health, but if properly managed, they can be the key to saving the health of the planet. Nathan takes us back in time to when the buffalo roamed in immense herds to understand how plants, soil, and animals all evolved symbiotically together. He tells us about how we've now begun to integrate these principles into the best farming practices today to reduce carbon emissions, improve soil health, and save money. And he gives us a vision of the future in which vineyards are actually built to accommodate and maximize the presence and influence of animals. I can't think of a more hopeful and revolutionary way to start 2021 than with this interview with a wine shepherd. Enjoy! Hey Nathan, thanks for joining the show. It's really great to talk to you.
Thanks for having me.
The really fun thing about talking to you is you are a shepherd. It just seems like the coolest thing. I don't even know where to begin because there's so many ways that we could approach this. But let's just start with, why would a winery have a shepherd? Well, tell us who you are, where you work, and then why would there be a shepherd at that place?
Okay. My name is Nathan Stuart. I work at Tablas Creek, and I am their in-house shepherd, as you mentioned. And Tablas Creek has a shepherd because they're an amazing company. They are very, very forward thinking, even though shepherding sounds like backwards thinking. This company, since the very beginning, it's been transparent and they've just never really changed. And at the very start, when they got their investors, the investment plan was like, we're not going to make any money, and neither our kids, but our grandkids are going to have something that is made the land better and done something really special. And so it was a really, really foolish investment idea. But these people just made an amazing decision to do something anyways, trying to create a Rhone style wine and prove that it could be done in California, and didn't cut any corners, even made things longer than they had to be because of their standards. And leaving things better than when we got here has always been at the core of their value and our value. And so they started farming biodynamic a couple years ago. They've always been organic, and as part of being biodynamic, you have an animal element to that. You have to create your own fertilizer on site. Most people that are running biodynamic are, they have like a petting zoo, and that's kind of what Tablas Creek had for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. And at one point, they just wanted to ramp that up into something more, just more effective and more powerful. And right now, our sheep program is, it's one of the major tools on the property next to the tractors and the crews and other things that we use to get jobs done. The sheep are right in there, and it's working out really well. So why sheep make things better? Sheep make things better because if you go back to, you kind of have to like deconstruct the whole concept of everything. All plants evolved with herbivores, and we took herbivores out of the equation in the Industrial Revolution, basically. And it was too complicated to be hauling around sacks of manure. And it was much easier when they presented us with NPK, nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus after World War II, which was used for, it was actually invented by Nazi scientists. And we took that information after World War II and started using that in our agricultural industries. Um,
Yep.
and we were able to give the illusion of fertile soil while we were actually killing all the microorganisms in the soil. Now, it goes the opposite direction when you put livestock back on the soil. They bring diversity, they're fertilizing the soil, they're enriching the lives of the microorganisms, making everything go faster and just building soil. So that the reason Tablas Creek has a shepherd, in short, is because they care about the soil and they want this place to be more diverse and more sustainable. That was
Yeah.
that was the long answer, and I gave you the short answer.
I want to jump into so many things. I mean, the idea of these grazing herds and the fact that the grasslands and the flora adapted and evolved together with with the fauna
Right.
is really profound. I mean, that's something that for the longest time, right, we've thought that grazing, grazing animals on land would degrade the land, and now we're
Mhm.
realizing it's because we were doing it wrong.
Right.
And you have, I've heard you actually talk about the buffalo herds and how you're trying to sort of replicate that, the model that they did. Can you talk a little bit more
Yeah, and
about that?
that's totally stolen from Alan Savory. Uh,
Alan Savory, right?
Yeah, and if you haven't seen the TED Talk on desertification, it changed my life. And if it doesn't change your life, it should at least give you goosebumps. But
Yep.
so yeah, the concept is there's nothing wrong with livestock. Obviously, if livestock were creating global warming, they would have done it back when we had millions of buffaloes in the United States.
Yeah.
The United States cattle herd is smaller than it's been in 75 years. But those cows are producing more damaging gases than we've ever seen in
Hmm.
history. So it's not the cow's fault. Cows are just cows. It's the fault of the managers of the livestock, how we're managing these animals, and how we've changed the way they live from their natural environment. That's the problem. In that lies the key to either creating or destroying. Um, if you can go back and imagine America before we got here, and there's an old pioneer in one of it's like his journal, and he's writing about coming over this mountain range in the Midwest, and he can see for 20 miles out across this valley, and he can't see the ground between the backs of buffaloes. So 20 miles of just nothing but buffaloes. And to me, all I can imagine is the millions of tons of manure being dropped on the ground, all the old buffaloes that are dying, the
Right.
young buffalo are staying at the front, and with a herd of that size, the animals at the back of the herd are literally starving to death because the front of the herd is eating all the food in front of them, right?
Mm.
So you have a mineral cycle, nutrients and meat and all this organic matter traveling across the surface of the ground, and it's breaking down much faster than you would see in a, you know, what we would consider a normal situation. Then you have the herbivores at the back of the herd chasing the young ones that are weak or the old ones that are dying from age or starvation. The
You mean
that
the
whole
carnivores?
Yeah, what did I say? Herbivores?
I
Yeah,
think,
sorry,
yeah, yeah.
I did. So yeah, the carnivores. So you got wolves and other predators moving the herd. The herd can't stay in one place for a couple reasons. Within 24 hours, there's no food where they are, and they're defecating and pissing all over the ground where they are as well. So they're constantly having to move on to fresh ground. So many lessons to be learned. If you stay in one place too long, you get a huge parasite buildup. So what do? We put chemicals into our animals to kill those parasites.
Okay.
Not a good thing, right?
Right,
Uh,
right.
in the natural world, what the animals would do is they would just keep moving on to fresh grass. So that's what we're doing. also, if an animal has a choice, if you put one animal on an acre of grass, that animal will go out and eat its favorite grass, just like we would go out and
Right.
eat favorite from that acre. Then the next thing you eat is whatever's left, and you go on down to the thing you absolutely hate. Within 5 years, that pasture will only be what you hate because that's what
Right.
you've allowed to seed out. So all these problems is why we've designed the holistic management system and why we graze the sheep the way we do. We keep them in high concentrations, so we're talking 250 sheep on no more than 2 acres, and they're never there for more than 2 days. The parasite cycle in the life of an animal is about 30 days, so they don't go back onto a pasture where they've been for at least 60. So that
Right.
kills that whole cycle of the parasites coming up on the grass, them being eaten, and then eggs being laid in the stomach and going out in the manure, and then it multiplies by the thousands as soon as it goes back
Right.
out in the manure. Um,
So
so we
that way
move,
you
sorry
keep the
again.
sheep healthy. Yeah, so you're keeping the sheep healthy by moving them around
Yeah, we're keeping the sheep healthy by letting them do
without
what they would
using
do. Yeah,
chemistry and
yeah,
antibiotics and things
yeah.
like that.
So there's nothing like you ask what is like what do we feed or what do we put in a Tablas Creek lamb? Just the grass. That's all they eat.
The cover
Um,
crops, right?
yeah,
Or
yeah, the
whatever
cover
it
crop. The we give them seaweed, which is locally harvested, because there's like highest concentrations of minerals and nutrients found in any plant, and so that's just kind
Mhm.
of our supplement for them to make sure they're getting a balanced diet. Um,
Nice.
and so yeah, so that's what we do. High concentration makes sure that all the plants get grazed evenly, whether they like it or not. They feel the pressure that in 24 hours there's not going to be any food, so don't be looking around too much. And it changes how they move and how they act. And it's incredible how many different things you can do with how you manage animals that changes how they react to the situation. So moving them a lot, keeping them in high concentrations is what, and that's kind of that whole concept of mimicking nature, mimicking the buffaloes. Uh,
Right.
and the buffalo is the reason why we have the Corn Belt. That's why there's so much amazing soil in the middle of the United States that was created by however many years of buffalo traveling across that year after year after year. So,
I've heard the phrase mob grazing,
mhm.
and I think mob is an acronym, right?
um,
Or is it
you know, it
or is
might.
it literally a
I
mob?
I think it's literally a mob, but I bet it's
Okay.
an acronym that I never was listening well enough in the class. But um,
I'll look it up.
it
I'll
got
go to
talked
my
about a
thing.
lot in a lot of classes I've been in. So if I missed it and it's an acronym, it's going to be hilarious. Mob grazing is just even more concentrated version of that. So you're now moving them every hour or every 4 hours instead of every uh, 1 or 2 days, 3 days.
Okay.
It's kind of splitting hairs. You're getting into most it, the climate you're in and how much rain you get can determine if you can do that or not. Since we're
Okay.
in a pretty arid region, um, we found that every single property is different, and I never try to tell anybody on their property how they should manage it, but we found that this amount of days works for us, and we don't get the kind of regrowth in the summer that maybe they get in Virginia or something like that, where they could do something more like a mob grazing.
Right. Well, since
What's
you
that
brought
guy? Joe Salatin does a lot of mob
oh,
grazing
yeah.
style stuff with
What
cattle.
is Polyface? Is that
Hmm.
Polyface Farms?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Um, so, well, since you brought it up, I mean, we're, now in December and it basically, has it rained in Paso Robles?
Nothing that would grow grass, not yet.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's happening? I mean, I'm sure the grass was long since gone by July even. And
Mhm.
what happens between now and, then and December for the animals?
So let's see. I would say what we do is we graze them all summer long during the growing season in the vineyard. Sorry about that. In the growing season, when the vines are all green, we keep the sheep out of the vineyard, and we have about 150, 160 acres of woodlands that we graze them in. Works out
Mm,
great because we're doing a lot of fire prevention around the vineyard, and
right.
it's got it's an oak forest, so it's shaded. So when it gets 110 out there, they have a nice spot in the shade. Now, soon as harvest is finished, the day they pull the last scrapes off the vines, I move the sheep into the vineyard. There's not a lot of feed on the ground because the vineyard hasn't, been growing grass since May, and all
Right.
that was mowed. But there's green leaves on the vines, and what we've basically decided is we can supplement feed them, which we'll buy organic alfalfa to feed them when there's no feed in the vineyard. But all that material, which is, we bought 24 tons, 50,000 plus pounds of alfalfa to feed the sheep over this interim between the grass running out and the grass starting to grow again.
Right.
All that material gets broken down in the sheep and turned into compost in the vineyard.
Right.
And so even now, even though we don't have grass and we're having to feed them, we're still dropping 200 to 400 pounds of manure every day in these blocks in the vineyard right now. Once the grass starts growing in the vineyard, obviously we don't have to feed them anymore. So we're probably at least 2 months away from grass.
Yeah.
And unfortunately,
That's about the,
it's a
they
bad
have to be
year
pulled
because
out.
so it'll rain over the next month, but it'll be too cold to grow grass on the Central Coast. The old timers say it takes 100-degree day, which means you add the high and the low together, and when it gets to 100, that'll start growing grass. So 60-40. So that won't happen for a month, and then it'll start, but won't barely be anything for another month, and then come March, it'll just take off, and we'll grow 3-4 feet of grass in 8 weeks. The problem is come March 15th, I got to pull the sheep out of the vineyard because we got bud break starting. So when it doesn't rain early in the fall, it really shortens my window of effective grazing in the vineyard. And that's why a couple of years ago we just decided, okay, well, whether the grass grows or not, and we have to supplement feed them, we'll do that, but we'll do it in the vineyard. So at least we're getting the benefit of them.
It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some years we barely have to buy any feed. If it rains in October, November, we're doing great. But California, it's heating
Yeah.
up, and it seems like there's been a lot more and more winters like this. So
Yeah. Well, yeah, and to bring that loop, that full circle, that's what the buffalo were doing is what you're doing for the vines, right? So you're essentially creating this beautiful, rich soil that the vines can grow in to make beautiful, delicious wine.
yeah,
And I mean, so I'll just say Tablas Creek, for anybody that doesn't know, in Paso Robles is one of the great wineries of America, like in so many ways, no expense spared. I actually grow a front yard vineyard that is a Syrah clone from the parent that that they brought over, the Tablas Creek parent clone of Syrah.
awesome.
Yeah, and but before going into that, I am friends with a couple who have two twin girls who are almost 11. One of them actually designed one of our labels. They're both amazing artists, very bright, amazing, curious girls. When they found out I would be talking to a shepherd today, they had a couple questions. So,
Okay, I'm ready.
um, uh, questions to ask the shepherd. Um, so I'll won't do these in order, and they also let me know that I could ask some of my own questions. That I didn't just have to.
That was
I
gracious.
wasn't limited to just these 7 questions.
Okay.
But I'll ask the ones that you can answer probably briefly first. How many sheep do you have? You said 250. Is that right?
Yeah, right now we're right about 250. I guess we're probably getting close to 300 because of lambing. So we have
Okay.
130 ewes that all get pregnant every year, and then they have about 150% reproductive rate. So that means every other one will have twins, roughly. And so we designed our lambing program to have them born in the fall so that my herd is as big as it could ever be in the year when the grass is the most available. So our herd will swell all the way up to almost 300 and then drop back down to 120, 130 when the grass runs out when it stops growing end of May.
Okay.
So it kind of swells and shrinks. So we'll harvest a bunch of lamb at the end of spring that will, source to local restaurants, and that brings me down to a manageable size to go to kind of make it through the summer until next winter again.
Okay, so interesting. So the 250, is that boys and girls?
That's everybody. So
What is a male sheep called?
okay, so there's a couple things. So you've got a
A ram?
you've got a ram, which is a male that's intact. Then you have a
Okay.
wether, which is a male that's not intact.
What was that again? The
A
word?
wether,
We-
Wether,
Weather. Okay.
wether, yeah. And then a ewe is a female sheep. So there's ewe lambs and wether lambs and ram lambs, and
Yeah.
then uh, a lamb is before a year old. After a year, it's called a yearling, and then it's just either
One
a
of those
ewe
other
or a
ones.
wether or a ram. And something to keep in mind: if you are eating lamb from Colorado, well, if you're eating lamb in a restaurant in California from Colorado, you're not eating lamb. The general, and there's always, I'm sure there's somebody out there doing an amazing job producing something, but I would say generally speaking, um, most of the lamb that comes out of Colorado comes from feedlots, just like the California Valley. And
Hmm.
if you understand that the shepherd pays the same price to kill and process an animal that weighs 120 pounds as a lamb that weighs an animal that weighs 80 pounds, it's just not viable to harvest lamb. So most people will harvest their animals when they get closer to 120 because they make that much more money per animal, and it costs a fixed amount to kill it, process it.
And is that
So we've
the
made,
yearling
say
at
again,
that point? Would it be a yearling at that weight, or would it
yeah,
be even
it would be a
full?
yearling.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not mutton. Mutton would be over
Over.
2 years.
Got it.
Um, but we've decided we wanted to sell real lamb, and so all of our lambs get harvested at right around 80 pounds. So we take a 20 to 30 pound cut in what we get back when we harvest, but it's real lamb that was still on its mother's milk, and um, it's amazing. It's pretty incredible
Wow.
stuff. So
Okay.
um,
So that was so that turned out to be a really good question. Ava wrote these questions down. Elise is her sister.
okay.
um, the other, I guess, my follow up to that is sheep. Are sheep the only animals that you shepherd
Yes.
there?
So we've got guard dogs. We've got two beautiful Spanish Mastiffs that I believe one is pregnant this year, which we've been waiting for a long time for that to happen. So pretty excited about that.
How big are those dogs?
Very big, 140, 150 pounds. Um, one of them's taller than me if it stands up. And I'm 6'3", so they're very big
Wow.
dogs. We had a huge problem with predation from coyotes, mountain lions, even golden eagles over the first couple of years of the program, and we tried donkeys, we tried llamas, we tried alpacas, and nothing really slowed it down until we got these dogs. And these dogs have completely stopped any loss from predators. And something amazing that everybody should support this concept is, when you have livestock guardian animals like dogs, donkeys, alpacas, what's awesome about that is you completely take out, nobody dies. You're not poisoning, you're not trapping any predators. The predators just don't come near because they're not comfortable around these guardian animals. And
Right.
so it keeps my sheep alive, it keeps the mountain lions alive, it keeps everybody happy and separate.
That's
um,
great.
so yeah,
And they just live with the sheep, right? Like they sort of become
full
part of the
time.
herd.
Full time, they've got
Yeah.
a doghouse that moves with the herd, and they're really quiet and very passive in the day. But even if I go to feed them at dusk, it's a totally different animal. I really have to make sure they know who I am before I get in the pen with them.
Wow.
They're
Why aren't the sheep afraid of them?
they don't act like a typical dog. It's pretty incredible. I run border collies to move the sheep, and the sheep can't stand even the sight of a border collie. But when I brought these Spanish Mastiffs into the herd, within like 10 minutes, they were like laying down with the sheep. They just, they're very, very submissive to the sheep. And so I think the sheep feel safe around them that way. And
Wow.
something about the breeds, the Spanish Mastiffs, the Akbash, the Anatolians, Maremas, these are all just different strains of the same Eastern European dogs. Um, they just bond with whatever they're living with and become very protective of it. So whether it's your kids, your chickens, your ducks, your sheep, um, they they'll put their life on the line for that thing. It's pretty amazing.
Wow.
No training. So of
That's
course
very cool.
you can get good dogs and you get bad dogs. We got good dogs this time, so that's great.
um, all right. Another question from Ava. Where are your sheep from?
Okay, that's a good question. So, our sheep are a breed of called Dorpers. That's the yeah, the breed, and we cross them with New Mexican Doll sheep. So Dorpers is a cross between a Dorset Ram and a Persian Blackhead, and they were developed, I think, in the 60s or 70s in South Africa. I think I got
Okay.
all that right. The New Mexican Doll sheep is the oldest sheep known to exist in the United States. It was brought over by the Spaniards and got lost in the desert in New Mexico. And the cowboys were bringing in cattle, and every year they would bring in the cattle, and there'd be like two or three of these random sheep. And somebody decided to check the genetics, and they separated out and saved an um, old herd, old breed. Um, we we crossed with them because we wanted their resistance to parasites. They're just a really hardy animal because they've been
Mm,
wild for 500 years. So they're a little more flighty, a little more leggy. So crossed with the Dorper is kind of a good combination. That they have
mhm.
the thickness of the Dorper, which is a great meat animal, but they have the hardiness of a more wild animal. And the Dorper bloodline, I've been running sheep in the Adelaides in West Paso since 2011. So those genetics, I was working at another ranch, Rangeland Wines, before I was at Tablas Creek, and so I brought those genetics over to Tablas Creek with me when I moved, and so those genetics have carried on now for 8 years, 9 years. Um, so that's been kind of exciting because the longer an animal spends in one place, the more they evolve to that place. And by that I mean the the ones that were meant to be here that can handle the environment, that can handle the kind of food they get, and the the climate, they do well and survive, and the ones that don't. So every year,
Right.
the herd gets stronger and just better at being here.
That's
So
great.
that's been cool to watch. The babies get fatter sooner. Everybody just keeps their weight on better. That's pretty neat to see evolution playing out in front of you.
That's very cool.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, okay. Do you know any other shepherds?
I do. I do. Alex and his wife with Outlaw, is it Outlaw Ranch? They're in Atascadero. They're amazing.
Okay.
They raise churro sheep. Let's see,
Nice.
Outlaw,
Is
yeah,
is there
Outlaw Valley Ranch. Um, they yeah, they're owners and operators of their own ranch, young couple, and they're doing pretty awesome stuff with churro sheep, which is another very old Native American herd. Um,
very cool.
and then Robert Irwin and his wife up in Lake County, I think they grazed 11,000 acres of vineyard last year. Um, they are doing what I'm doing on a big scale with Robert Mondavi Vineyards and all sorts of stuff in Sonoma County. Those guys are Chaos Sheep Company, pretty amazing people. And then Kelly Mulville out in at Piscines Ranch up near Hollister. They're doing some awesome stuff with sheep and vineyards. All those people you can um, get a hold of, and they'll be really wonderful and very helpful if you're interested in running sheep in your vineyard. Yeah.
Um, Here's a question for me. I actually wanted to interview you because, I mean, for many reasons, because I think, what you do, I believe is so integral to wine, and as yet mostly overlooked, I would say.
Hmm.
Um, but also because I just think I would love being a shepherd, and so I'm very jealous of you. And so my question is, should I be jealous? Like, and this ties into one of Ava's questions, which is, what is your daily life like? What's the reality of being a shepherd? And is it something I should be jealous of?
It's been a lot of things over the years. Right now, it's pretty posh. I, I I've got an amazing crew of guys that help me, so I usually don't have to work that hard, honestly. So I do a lot of coordinating with the restaurants and doing sales on the meat and um, doing stuff like this podcast or and back when we were doing conferences, going to conferences and talking and stuff like that.
Mm,
I'm also the videographer at Tablas Creek, so I do a lot of video work. So I just
right.
totally blew my romantic image out of the water. Uh, but for
Not
years,
sleeping out under the stars with a
yeah,
staff and
with the staff, yeah. We do use the staff during lambing a lot,
uh-huh.
to catch
All right.
lambs, and
That's good to know.
the we have I've done day grazing in the past where you're literally on horseback or with the dogs moving the sheep around without fencing. Um,
Right.
so I've done that for months on end, but we don't really need to do that in the situation at Tablas Creek, so we haven't done that much of that. Um, I think the beautiful side of it is anytime you set up a pasture with electric net fencing, which we'll do a couple times a week, and moving the sheep into a new paddock and seeing them all move out onto fresh pasture, and then seeing how well you did at timing when we moved them off,
Uh,
so that where they were is left perfectly mowed, but not
right.
overgrazed or damaged. Um, I always tell people sheep are just another tool so they can damage things just like tractors can. So if you do manage them wrong, they're not just an automatic benefit to the vineyard.
Right. Right.
Um, so that's probably one of my favorite things. Lambing is always really exciting, but it's also um, it's bittersweet because there's a lot of death involved in lambing. When you have 130 animals having babies, there's always going to be some complications. Um, most days it's a lot of like helping things come into this world and be alive, and that's really, really addicting. But some days, like if we have a really bad storm, we can lose several lambs in one night, and fighting that and going to bed worrying about if you did everything you could to make sure that your animals are safe and healthy is that can be pretty exhausting mentally and emotionally.
Mm, okay.
Yeah, I say the good side is definitely, yeah, the good side is the life part of it and the magic of life, and the bad side of it is the opposite of that. When you're dealing with that many alive things and they can drop like goldfish sometimes, it can be a little bit hard.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, no, I've cared for chickens for the last, I don't know, several years, and yeah, they're very similar in that
Yeah,
sense. Like,
yeah.
if you have more
It,
than one, you're gonna lose. And yeah, you're gonna lose some at
it's
some
gonna
point.
happen. Yeah, it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've learned, I think there's a really fine line, and this is gonna get too sappy for the average cowboy or cowgirl, but I feel like when you're dealing with livestock, you deal with a lot of death. And sometimes what people do is they just get kind of calloused and hard and they'll joke about it, but it's almost to like hide the fact that like nobody likes to have to put things out of their misery or deal with things that are in pain.
Hmm.
And so trying to keep an open heart and be sensitive to the stuff, and still functioning is a tricky balance, because it's important to be very much aware of um, any suffering any animal that's under your care is experiencing, but at the same time it can be very overwhelming doing that too. So I think a lot of people just check out, so trying not to check out is a challenge.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, and you seem like, I mean, from what little I know from just trying to glean some of your history, you seem like a pretty free spirited person who probably has a deep connection to the animals in some way, in many ways. I mean, I wonder about that soulful part, and maybe does that tie into how you became a shepherd, and how that how I mean, is there a moment that you decided this is what you wanted to do, or was it a series of events that led you to
I
this?
I don't know. It was kind of a weird road. I mean, as a kid, I always wanted to be a cowboy, but I wasn't born on a ranch. And growing up on the Central Coast, it was always rural, and we rode horses and played around. But I still didn't own a ranch. And so at some point, I gave up on that idea. And I mean, it's a long story. I ended up in Mexico, and I was working in the wine industry in Mexico. And what really got me into the sheep was um, Casa de Piedra in Mexico. Hugo da Costa is the winemaker, and he's kind of the Robert Mondavi of Baja wines. Um,
Mm.
he had a vineyard at Casa de
Is
Piedra. I think it was Chardonnay.
is that
And
the like the 500-year-old
no, no,
winery?
no, that's Santo Tomas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Um,
Got it. Okay.
but Hugo did work for Santo Tomas originally as their enologist years and years ago.
Okay.
Um, So he had the whole vineyard set up to where it was super narrow rows and the vines were really close together to create competition between the vines so that the root systems would be kind of keeping the vigor down on the plants.
Mm-hmm.
But that meant you couldn't get a tractor in there. So
Right.
everything was hand hoed. And I got hired on, and I think it was kind of like, let's see if the gringo can survive this. And so the first season I got put on just hoeing with the hoeing crew,
Oh my
and
God.
we would finish. It was only a couple acres, but we would finish it, and by the time we finished it, we'd have to start over because the crabgrass had come back.
Wow.
And it was just insane. It was just an insane labor task that seemed ridiculous to me.
Scythian. Yeah.
And I got lost on YouTube like we all do, and somehow I think I first found a vineyard up in Canada that was running sheep in their vineyard for leaf thinning and grazing under the vines. And I was like, oh my God, these vines are narrow. We can't get the tractor in. We could get sheep in. And then I ran into Kelly Mulville. I almost said Kelly Slater. Ran into Kelly Mulville online, and he had gotten an article in Sommelier Weekly or Sommelier something magazine, and it was talking all about this vineyard and the study that they did, where they ran sheep parallel to a block where they didn't run sheep, and the numbers he was bringing back were unbelievable. It was, you know, an extra 2 tons to the acre in yields, 50% less water used, on and on and on and on. Like a
Wow.
savings of like 500 per acre, um, all this stuff. And so I
Right.
called up Kelly, and that was I called up Kelly 12, 13, maybe 14 years ago now,
Uh-huh.
and started talking to him from Mexico. Just got obsessed with the idea of sheep and vineyards. I just thought it was such a win-win-win concept. And there's so many things now you find the more you work with nature, a lot of these concepts become very win-win-win-win because that's how nature was put together to be
Right.
beneficial to everything and let everything survive, as opposed to, the Industrial Revolution, which was not about that at all. Um, so he got me
Well,
hooked.
so
Go ahead.
I mean, yeah, I'm just gonna interject to say it sounds like this all started because the lazy gringo was trying to get out of the hard labor.
Absolutely, and that hasn't changed. It's still the case today. the,
Sorry,
yeah, that's.
go.
Thank you for making that point. um, so yeah, like I last year, or the year before, I don't know, before COVID shut down, like me and Kelly put on a conference together or a seminar on grazing sheep in vineyards, and um, I've been on panels with him. It's been really fun for me because like he was my mentor that got me into it, and every time I'm doing anything with him, I'm just excited. He continues to be pushing the envelope on ways to develop vineyards so that they're ready for sheep from the get-go,
Yeah,
which
that's
in my
brilliant.
opinion is the future of the wine industry. It'll save them billions of dollars annually in weed maintenance. It hasn't taken off like I wish it would, but if you're interested in planting a vineyard and you want to run sheep, you need to call Kelly Mulville up at Piscini's Ranch. He's got a 30-acre vineyard that's designed to run sheep all year, and it's never been disked, and it's amazing in my opinion. So
I mean, that's incredible.
yeah, so he's still, he continues to push the envelope, and working with him has been great. We've started a trial block at Tablas Creek to test different um, trellis structure systems so that we could run the sheep after bud break, because that's the big downfall of this whole idea. Is it all sounds great, like, oh, you're just going to bring the sheep in and they're going to make the whole vineyard look like a golf course. Yes, until March 15th, and then the grass starts growing. So from March 15th to the end of May, if I could graze in the vineyard without damaging buds, it would change everything. The tractors wouldn't turn on. We would save thousands and thousands of dollars in diesel fuel, and we would have way
Not to
less
mention
carbon
the
going into the atmosphere,
right,
way
right.
less compaction in the vineyard. The list just goes on and on and on of all the benefits that would cause. I bring the benefit basically of fertilizing the vineyard whenever I can be in there. But come bud
Right.
break, it's just too much of a liability. That's the
S-
crop for the year.
So I
So
imagine the main design change would be raising the fruiting canes up to a certain level where the sheep wouldn't reach it.
yeah, it seems like, it depends on the breed, but it seems like somewhere around 55 inches is the browse line for my sheep. So if I am above 55 inches, then I'm safe. They don't eat the berries when they're green. So before variation, I'm fine. Because if you've ever eaten a berry before when it was still green, you would never do it again. And they feel the same way. Um, so yeah, I think that's the future. I hope. I don't care who takes that idea. I think everybody should run with it, and
Yeah, that's
the best to the first person across that line, because we need it for the planet. So yeah, the
cool. I, yeah,
right.
you go ahead. Do you want to?
No, I just said the with no reason.
Oh, okay. I do that all the time.
Yeah. It's like my other
Wild animals. So obviously you got the domestic animals, but let's talk about what are the benefits of, or what kind of wild animals do you have to deal with, and how do you, what is do you in any way, quote unquote, manage them, and how so, and or what benefits or otherwise do they bring to the?
Well, just the presence of sheep on land do a couple things. Well, depending on how they're managed, but the way we're managing them is beneficial to perennial grasses, which is the native grasses of California. And that's you can geek out on that for days.
Yeah,
Think that the whole scenery around here was totally different. It wasn't these rolling green hills. It was all, or rolling golden hills. It was all bunch grasses that were super drought tolerant and didn't need as much rain, because even though global warming is happening now, California has always had droughts, and the
right.
plants that are from here are used to droughts. The plants that are not from here, which is all of the grasses on all the hills, which is all European seeds, don't do well at all in this setting.
Hmm.
So when you start grazing land in the way it's supposed to be grazed, how it was grazed before, those plants just naturally start popping up. And as
Wild.
those plants start popping up, the native animals like the deer and the elk, they start following your herd because they remember that plant somehow. And like that, like gives me
That's
goosebumps.
that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, so they start realizing that the food that they were literally genetically designed to eat starts coming up after these sheep come through. That's pretty cool. So that I've seen that happen in other places. We don't have elk here, but the deer come through and will follow the sheep and around here. But I've got friends running cattle up north, and they've had the same thing happen with elk, and that's pretty cool.
That's
Um,
amazing. Yeah.
Otherwise, we're not using any chemicals because we're grazing sheep, so there's no insects getting killed in our vineyard at all. Um,
Hmm.
but we're able to graze down the cover crop low enough, so we'll focus in the early spring on areas that are low sitting where we could probably have frost damage, and we'll graze that before we could ever get a tractor in there because it's too wet.
Got
And
it.
that helps prevent frost damage on the plants, because the cold air will literally sit on top of a cover crop, and so having it grazed down to a couple inches off the ground gives us that extra foot maybe of not freezing the vines.
Hmm.
Um, so being strategic with them there. So I back to animals, I guess. Yeah. So the insects, got a lot of insects. Um, we plant a lot of beneficial plants for insects to bring more and more insects onto the property. Um,
And
Otherwise,
what about
oh,
like,
all of
go ahead.
our birds in the vineyard build all of their nests with wool. All of them, all of them. Every
That's
nest has wool in it on Tablas Creek. Um,
that's hilarious. Do they come down and steal it right off the lambs, or do they just pull it out of
no, the
things that
sheep
the lambs have
walk
rubbed
under.
against?
They walk under the vines and they leave wool
Right.
all the catch wires and the on the irrigation line. So I I I keep I always joked like that's probably going to make something instinct at some point because we introduced the sheep. Like there's these. It's
Right. Right.
It's like the certain bird is gonna like have a way better survival rate because now it has wool in its nest, which is 20% less cold when wet, and they're gonna have more babies, and it's gonna wipe out some important insect. Hopefully not.
It's it's true.
We
Oh
don't
my
know
gosh,
what we're dabbling with when it comes to nature, so there's always a chance that uh, never think you know what you're doing.
that's amazing. Well, and you guys don't use bird nets, right?
No, we don't use bird nets.
Which is insane. I mean, some people would think that's insane. Like, what's the rationale? How do you manage that?
I think
Or do
it's
you just
just
change your philosophy about?
I think the philosophy is like they were here too. They've never wiped us out. I mean, there's probably a 10-15% loss to birds every year. Um, that's so classic, like farmer mentality though. Like there's a problem and it's a percentage of profit, and I need to fix it at all costs. Half the time, the process to fix it costs more than what you're losing. And that's the cover crops definitely have their place and their value in so many situations, but a lot of time you're getting sold a seed that will basically be the same seed that grows naturally on your property. So let's go buy
Right.
a bunch of mustard seed and plant that when if you would just stop doing anything, mustard grows pretty well in California and it's in the ground. Um, so you're like, well, oh, but this mustard is I don't know genetically modified to give you 20% more uh, nitrogen in the soil or whatever. I'm making stuff.
Right, right.
Uh,
Yeah.
the okay 20%. How much is 20% really worth, and how much did you just spend when you bought a whole pallet of mustard seed? Had to prep your soil with a tractor. So in our case, 120 acres has to be prepped, and then another 120 acres has to be seeded. And you get all that done. You're like, how much did that cost me, and how much was that 20% really worth?
Right.
Uh, so a lot of times, I think we try to fix things when we don't need to fix things.
Yeah.
And I think the bird netting is just another one of those things where we're like, you know what, we're buying netting. It's all plastic. We're rolling
Right.
it out. It takes our guys, a week. How much does that cost us, and how much do we really lose? So,
Right.
uh,
And it sounds like that philosophy of sort of like letting nature do its thing it sounds like you're at the right place for that. I mean, that sounds like the
oh,
driving philosophy there at Tablas Creek.
yeah, Tablas Creek. This team is so amazing at that stuff. There's a lot of amazing people out there that want to do amazing stuff but don't have the financial backing. And Tablas Creek has put their money where their mouth is, and it's paid off for them. So that's just great that they let us do stuff, and it doesn't always work. We fail all the time. We don't make videos about the stuff we fail at, but but yeah, it's a learning process, but the fact that they allow us to learn creates this environment where we're constantly growing, and so that's incredible.
That's great.
We've just got obsessed with biochar. It's all we can talk about now. So we're getting into building our own kiln and on and on. Um,
Have you seen that documentary? God, the one that is narrated by, oh gosh, I
Kiss
can
the
never
ground.
remember. Say that again?
Kiss the ground.
No, not Woody Harrelson. It's the one. It's a female actor, and it wasn't like on Netflix. It was something else. It was. Anyway, there is a energy
Oh, is
facility
that
that
the
was.
one that burned down?
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Oh my
that one.
God, that was incredible and kind of
Right.
scary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the use of like the methane caused by the the swamp conditions, the greenhouse,
Yeah,
channeling back to funnel
incredible.
the biochar producer and the oh my God. I mean,
It
that
can
was just
power
incredible.
and feed a whole city block kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
technology's there. We've got it. Like we just got to beat the big corporations because we can do it. Um,
Yeah.
there's already people out there with the science that know how to make this completely sustainable. We just got to stop spending money on things that aren't sustainable. Um,
Yep.
that's the
So what
only
about
thing that matters is
are,
our spending dollar, how we vote with it. That's
yeah,
that's
that's
the make or break. We live in a capitalist country. It's all about the money. So don't try to change that. Just keep it about the money. Just start spending it in the right direction. Even though I just said I spend money on Amazon, so I'm a total hypocrite.
no, I mean, and we all are. I think it's like doing what you can. I mean, it shouldn't demoralize anybody to know that you have to make compromises. Don't be overwhelmed by the guilt of that. I mean, that's just
Absolutely. Yeah.
part of being human, but keep making the good choices that you can make where you can
Yeah.
make them, you
Yeah.
know?
I mean, trying to encourage myself as well as everybody else. We can do this. We got
Yeah,
to do this. We don't really have
absolutely.
a choice anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the kind of wine you buy is a big one, you know, like
Huge,
buying Tablas
huge.
Creek wine is obviously supporting something that is wonderful and beautiful and pro life in the best sense. And you know,
And you're
yeah, and
affecting, like, like in Tablas Creek's case, or in any other organic biodynamic operation, your your dollar is going not to just a company. It's going to, in Tablas Creek's case, 260 acres of land that is going to be managed differently because of your dollar. Like, you're
right.
affecting large pieces of land. It's all agriculture. How we spend money on agriculture is going to be the quickest way to change things because
Yep.
so much land is affected by simple decisions like, okay, we're going to spray this 1,000 acres with Roundup. That's
Yep.
devastating, or we're not
Yeah.
going to spray it with Roundup and we're going to run livestock on it instead. That is super powerful. Um,
Yep.
the
It's
carbon that gets put down into the ground from a decision like that is, megatons over the next 20 years. That's really cool. So,
yeah. Well, since I mean, along this topic, let's talk about Talus Creek was the first winery to get Regenerative Organic Certified, which is a new certification that's come out. Uh, building on organic certification, biodynamic certification, as well as animal welfare and sustainable practices. What was your role in that? Since you were the shepherd, and I know animal welfare is part of that. What is that like, and what are kind of metrics do they look at, and yeah, how did you play into that certification process?
the I'm trying to think. I think
Biodiversity.
we were already working with the greener world with animal welfare approved, or it was at the same time, and we already had CCOF certification. So there wasn't a lot of changes for us as far as how our program was ran. I think there's a couple little changes that we made, but the how the ROC works is it's a three-part certification, and those are all third-party companies that come in and do that. So ROC doesn't do well, they do their own audit, but you also get audited by the three um, kind of stool legs of the certification. So we get audited by a company for um, fair trade. The social aspect of it would get audited by a company for the soil health, and then we get audited by a company for the animal welfare, and then we get audited by ROC for the whole thing.
Got it.
Um, and by so I mean this it was pretty simple. They're great to work with. They're since they're new and they're working closely with Patagonia, they and Bronner, who's been farming amazingly for years now. Um, they were pretty sensitive to the farmer and really open to hearing what's realistic and what's not realistic, and some of the loopholes that we've seen other certifications go through. Where, I mean, like the organic certification has destroyed so much topsoil in America. It's ridiculous because it just says you can't use chemicals. It doesn't say you can't disc your soil in
Wow.
the
Yeah.
ocean.
Right.
So a lot of big companies don't own land for organic farming. They lease it because they know in 5 years it'll be played out.
Wow.
And that's what organic certification brought us. because the root of the problem isn't the fact that, you know, some people want organic. It's the fact that the big corporations are always just going to be trying to make a buck. So
Right.
until the best way to make a buck is doing it right, it's just somebody's going to find a loophole, you know?
Right.
Um, so the ROC certification was designed to hopefully get rid of some loopholes. And that's really exciting. The most exciting thing for me on the ROC certification was really head up by Jordy Longborg, our viticulturist, because he has really been championing our labor force, all the Mexican guys that work in the vineyard with us, and has worked hard to make sure they're, you know, getting fair wage and things like that. And I can't believe in this day and age, the entire wine industry, there's no fair trade system set up at all in any
Yeah.
winery.
Yeah.
And the loophole is, well, none of them are employees. It's through a labor contract company because all of them are illegal. So
Right.
that was a big challenge. And we had to work with the fair trade certifiers because they'd never done anything like this, and with ROC. And it was quite a process to try to figure out a way where we could provide a fair trade system when they aren't even our employee. And that's been really, really cool to watch, like tear jerking cool to watch. Um,
Oh,
just the empowering of our employees. You know, we started having weekly board meetings where all the guys would come in their muddy boots and sit down at the big fancy Tablas Creek board table, and have the freedom to share, like, hey, like, we hate this gopher trap. It doesn't work as good as this other gopher trap. And um, it was like there had to be a foundation built for them to be able to feel comfortable to share, even though we've never made them uncomfortable at sharing. It's just there was some bridges that had to be crossed and a foundation that had to be set up. So they came out and did like a 3-day team building thing, and it was hilarious. I mean, everybody was involved, and we're doing trust falls and all this hilarious stuff, and it was really good for the team and really, really good for the Mexicans. I think it was. Um, Being somebody that lived in Mexico 12 years and speaks Spanish, and I'm good friends with a lot of these guys, it's been really exciting to watch them just be empowered. So,
that's very cool. I mean, on this podcast, more than once, I've brought up the point that, you know, just in terms of you know, if you just want to make a better wine, it just makes sense that the guys that work in your vineyards should also maybe have some process and some involvement with the end product. Like,
mhm.
the fact that people don't get to taste what they're doing in the vineyard seems like a huge disconnect that would, if you made that connection, quickly improve quality because they would, you know, that seeing that connection as the person growing the vines to what the wine is seems like, oh, you know, it seems like lights would just go off, and that, and just the involvement in the process there would stop being sort of like a classist separation between, you know, cellar and vineyard.
Yeah, and it's
um
super beneficial to us as a company. I mean, they have locked in their brain
exactly.
is a wealth of knowledge. Nobody knows the vineyard better than these guys. So, and since we are a good company, a lot of these guys have been here 10, 15, 25, 30 years. So they've literally had their hands on every single vine 100 times over the last couple of years. And so to not use that information is just a waste of investment. Um,
Right.
and I mean, start off this year we decided, or last year we decided, to change our whole pruning timing because the guys told us to. They said,
Wow.
you know, like, they're like, last year you guys brought in another crew and we did it way faster, but we think we can do the whole vineyard if we start earlier. And we changed up the program and they did it, and it was great. And they were proud of it because they knew that the whole program had been changed because of their suggestion, and
Mm.
it was just cool. It was cool to
And
see.
they had greater ownership of the work and the end result too, because they
Right,
didn't have to
right,
have
right.
some outside help. That's
Yeah.
very cool.
So it's I mean, this harvest was a challenge with COVID. It was quite a challenge with COVID, but we've, you know, just through the whole thing been really supportive of the guys too. If anybody's sick, you know, they get paid time off, even though they aren't actually our employee. Stuff like
Mm.
that has been really awesome. The company really takes care of their people. So
More great reason to buy Tablas Creek wine.
it really is. I'm like a beer drinker myself, but you should buy Tablas Creek wine.
I love that. And so since we're talking about wine, is the wine any better because of all this stuff that you guys are doing?
I think there's, I mean, that goes a lot to Neil and what happens in the cellar, which again is really hands off and letting things do what they're going to do. None of our wines, absolutely none of our wines get meddled with. There's no changing of the amount of alcohol in the wine or spinning stuff out or adding in flavors or any of that, and using all native yeast and being really light on the oak influence is pretty awesome. And Neil's philosophy has just been to create a wine that reflects the place, and everything we do. Hey, sorry, we got a new puppy in here. Everything we do in the farming, just everything we do in the farm. Hold on,
That's all right.
puppy wrapped herself up in the cables behind the computer. Um,
Aw.
so yeah, what I was saying was Neil wanting everything to be everything to reflect a place more. So if we're trying to give an honest reflection of Tablas Creek and what this microclimate creates, that means our farming has to be that too. So anything we can do to make the soil more natural.
I mean, have you guys done any trials in terms of, because you're certified biodynamic, right? And you continue that certification, or no?
Yes, yeah, we're
Okay, yeah.
yeah, so we're still biodynamic.
Still
Uh,
biodynamic in addition to regenerative organic. I just heard something, a winery there who's doing like a side by side comparison now between conventional and I think regenerative organic viticulture to do like a, sort of a side by side trial. I'm just curious if you guys have.
we worked with Cal Poly in the soil science department, and we got the Healthy Soil Initiative grant a couple years back. And so we did a lot of testing of carbon sequestering in the vineyard because of our practices, whether it was till or no till, using the livestock, how we manage an organic vineyard. So we've done a lot of like paying attention to the soil, our nitrogen levels, stuff like that. As far as flavors and being able to taste any different, I think it's more about healthy vines on healthy soil produce healthy grapes, um,
Yeah,
and and a more accurate expression of place.
yeah,
And I think that is what our wines have always done, been really expressive and very, I mean, uh, the terroir gets overused all the time, and I'm going to overuse it again because it's just, if you want real terroir, it's got to be honest, and it's got to be raw. The same thing coming out of the vineyard is what you're getting in the glass, and that's how you get a snapshot of a year at Tablas Creek, in the glass.
yeah,
And that's why wine is so addicting, because it's this incredible capture of time that can be held for years and years later, and it reflects the place so well.
yeah,
So I think they're a lot lighter wines than a lot of the wines made in the Paso area. We really try to keep that European style. We're picking a lot earlier than some of our neighbors, um, and they're more food friendly wines because of that. Um, yeah, but they're really complex as well. So really
yeah.
complex. The whites, they've always said the whites came out way better here than they even expected. The whites are pretty amazing at Tablas.
Fantastic. Well, Nathan, I mean, I just think my instincts in wanting to talk to you, I think, have been proven in that what you're doing and the animal component is really just such an integral and necessary way to start thinking about agriculture in general, vineyards specifically. I mean, even to the point of like maybe we need to plant our vineyards differently to accommodate animals in the way that they should be incorporated. And I just thank you so much for bringing this perspective. I think it's really revolutionary. It's very cool.
Well, thanks for giving me the time to get on the soapbox. I really do think livestock back in agriculture could really, really turn things around. Watch that TED Talk if you haven't about desertification, and he really just shows the amount of carbon we can capture back into the soil and hold forever. It's incredible. It gives hope in an environment that doesn't seem very hopeful. There's so much stuff that people see all the time that's just so negative about the future and the planet. And I've always been really critical of any like magical thing that's supposed to save the planet if it's not scalable. And livestock and land and large pieces of land is very scalable. And that's what we need, because we need to make big changes on big pieces of land quickly, because that's what we've been doing slowly over the past 100 years, slowly cutting down the forest, slowly, burning carbon. So we need to make big, fast changes on large pieces of land.
Yep. So that's Alan Savory, Allan Savory,
Alan
TED
Savory.
Talk about desertification, 1S, not 2, not the delicious follow-up to a meal. And then the thing I just remembered, it's Rosario Dawson is the narrator of The Need to Grow. And that was that thing that we were talking about earlier with that biochar, methane plant, electrical plant.
Another documentary that definitely should be watched.
Incredible. Yeah.
Really
just like you said, the technology is there to have a fully self-sustaining, green, zero pollutant system that powers and feeds like an entire city block.
If you have a billionaire friend, make him watch that, because
exactly
billionaires to make more of those.
Exactly. A lot more.
Yeah.
Is there any way that you would want people to get in touch with you? Are you contactable? Are you?
Absolutely. Nathan at tablascreek.com. Any questions, especially about sheep and vineyard? Actually, only about sheep and vineyard, please. The Tablas Creek has made it like their policy to basically anybody that has questions and wants help on that, I'm to be available. So that's something very generous they offer.
That's fantastic.
My time on that. So feel free, and I will get back to you, and I'll get on the phone with you and talk your ear off. So
awesome.
This wasn't enough.
I'm sure for some, if anybody's like me, this just whets your appetite for more. So I think it's fantastic. And if anybody doesn't know Tablas Creek, definitely go to tablascreek.com. Like I said, one of America's great wineries. I mean, truly top 5, so get to know and get to taste for sure. Nathan, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Adam.
If you enjoyed this interview, please leave a review on whatever app you're using to listen. It's a big help. Nathan made a great point about how the simple choices you make as a consumer, whether to buy this wine or that wine, can shape the way huge pieces of the earth are treated. That's why I started this podcast, and that's why I started my winery, Centralis. I wanted to promote people who are farming in a way that improves life on planet Earth. You can support these farmers by buying Tablas Creek wines, as Nathan said, as well as by buying Centralis wines. All Centralis wines, my winery, are made from grapes that were grown organically or better. You can learn more and buy wine at tablascreek.com. That's TABLAS creek.com, or at our website, centraliswine.com. That's CENTRALAS wine.com. It's an easy and delicious way to promote a cleaner, healthier, and more hopeful future for the planet. Thanks.